And so what we wanted to do is to figure out how, it's kind of like having a big hole in your economy. So no matter how much money you bring in, you're always going to have a hole and you're going to lose it. So we decided to try to focus on getting it local, our food economy. That's what we're thinking of, yeah? And then we did the same thing with energy. We did an assessment. We spend about 1/4 of our money on energy. The US spends 1/5. But we're more rural, more remote, more colder. And so we spent 1/5 of our money on energy, 1/4 of our money on energy. And the same thing, we didn't have any dinosaurs. So that represents a big drain in our economy. So we decided to look at how we could relocalize both of those. And we start with plowing more gardens, you know, and I was very interested in it. I had watched some, what's that movie called, The Garden? Is that what we were talking about? Was that the Southside Farmers or, huh? Yeah, I was very interested in that struggle, you know, and that's a very important struggle. We plowed a lot of gardens on our reservation, and then we started to restore these old varieties of corn because the non-hybrid, non-GMO varieties are not only pre-industrial, and so they aren't used to fertilizers and chemicals and irrigation, but a lot of them were drought resistant and frost resistant because they weren't pampered. You understand what I'm saying? And so we grow this one variety of corn called a Bear Island Flint, and then I had very good success this last year with a Manitoba White Flint, and it's about this tall. It's a short corn, but it has large ears. And it's short so that when you have a wind sear or a 70-mile-an-hour wind that goes through, you got a better shot at hanging out there, right? And so those varieties, that's what we call them, the climate change resistant varieties. It's our perception that these non-hybrid older varieties, or you know, perhaps their seed-selected adaptations, are going to have a better shot in a time of climate change. The other thing about those varieties is that many of them are much higher in amino acids and antioxidants than their industrial successors. In other words, if you compare a market bean of a lima bean to a Potawatomi lima bean, you find that Potawatomi lima beans have 47 times the antioxidants of a market bean. Interesting. So I'm not sure how that plant breeding changed the plants. You know, they changed them so they could travel a long time, they'd be uniform, and they'd look beautiful. You know what I'm saying, for industrial food production? But they lost some of their nutrition. So that's what we decided to grow. And we're focusing on that, and this morning we're having our 7th farming conference, Indigenous farming conference up in our area, where we share seeds of stories and success and are trying to grow out those varieties from boutique levels to levels that will support a community, so that you not just have, like, you know, enough to have for one feast, but you have enough to eat 40% of the year, right? And that's our strategy for food security in our community. And then ultimately, we sell a lot of wild rice. It's called Native Harvest. And we use that to capitalize our food work, because we have more wild rice than we have this corn. So we grow the food, and we got a USDA certified food production facility, and then we have the first tribal farm-to-school program in the state, and one of the first in the country. And that's what we were working with some students that were affiliated with Occidental on, documenting our program. And you're familiar with the farm to school. Ours is in a K-8 elementary school, where most of the kids were headed towards diabetes at a pretty young age. And we decided to try to relocalize it, get more local food, and decolonize their taste buds. Because a lot of those kids had grown accustomed to macaroni, or had, you know, and chicken sticks, or whatever those things are, yeah. And so we had to, my daughter is working on the curriculum right now for our hominy varieties, or wasana, which is a pemmican, or is a dried meat, buffalo meat with choke cherries, or buffalo meat with blueberries, that has a whole different nutritional value, yeah. And so that's what we're working on, is getting our kids reacculturated to traditional foods over industrialized food systems. Challenge, though, a challenge. Then we're working on energy, and we realize that we lose a lot of energy through inefficiency, and you all know this. About a third of our energy is wasted in this country, at least. Not only between point of production and point of use, but internal to households and institutions. But besides that, in addition to that, we find that the potential for localized energy is very great. And you have, I don't need to tell you that you really have no excuse to not be entirely solar down here. You know, be efficient and be solar. We don't have as much solar potential, but what we have is solar heating panels we're putting on the south side of our houses. And those reduce the heating bills by about 20% in a house that is weatherized. Because we are cold, it's about -5 where I live right now, yeah? But it's sunny. And so if you are placed correctly with a solar heating panel, you can still heat your house in that cold. And it's a simple form of technology. It's appropriate. You can install it locally. In fact, if you want to, you can make one with 87 pop cans. You know, that's how the technology is relevant and can be made in our communities. And we install ourselves. So we started installing some solar heating panels, and now as well we are looking at a wind turbine. And we should have one up by the end of the year, and my tribe will have one up within a year. It's a 75 kilowatt wind turbine. It's of a size that we can put it up ourselves without having a crane from Denmark. And it is of technology choices that we can build the intellectual capital locally. So that's what we are doing. The implications of what we are doing for larger communities, you know, I don't think you need me to spell it too much out for you. But the reality is that the transformation of the largest and most inefficient economy in the world, the US economy, to a economy which is durable, requires a massive amount of intellectual, I would say spiritual and technological and financial capital. That's what it takes. You know, what we have is a highly inefficient economy which is based on consumption, and the more you consume, the more profits they make. The utility companies and the food companies. And that is really not a long-term plan, particularly considering our financial situation as a country. So the question is that if you relocalize, you deal with issues like climate change. Why is that? Because a good portion of CO2 is emitted from agriculture. The destruction of rainforests far away and the transportation of the food from farmer to table. Add to that the fact that industrialized agriculture mines the soil while organic restores soil and restores carbon in the soil. Which is why they say that if you restored industrialized agriculture to organic, you would reduce CO2 emissions on a worldwide scale by 25%. Now, doing that locally is what is essential. Because if you try to have organic agriculture that is far away, you're still faced with the other problems of peak oil, transportation, relations being not necessarily just, and the fact that you are still CO2 emitting. So we are trying to teach our children that growing food and farming is not something that other people do. I'm saying that because it's important. You're all young. You know, I talk to a lot of young people in our community on the reservation, and one time I said, and this is true, I think you know this, that a hoe is a garden tool. That is what a hoe is, you know. But most people could not necessarily recognize a hoe, right? And is it, we as intellectuals, you know, we spend a lot of time being really smart. And, you know, we go to school, but we remove ourselves from being able to grow food. Is that the smartest thing? Does that make us better humans? Does it make us smarter in the end? I want to make the argument no. And, you know, as Mr. Wayne here knows, he knew my father. My father used to have a philosophy, which I didn't understand until about 4 years ago. He used to tell me, I don't want to hear your philosophy unless you can grow corn. It's an interesting thing that he said. But it's like, wow, you're really smart. Can you do anything? You know? It's an interesting consideration. Similarly, localizing an energy economy transforms the social and political relationship of this country.